James never thought much about ordinary evenings. Work days blurred into each other, and by the time he left his office, his energy was usually gone. That Tuesday in Seattle felt no different. The sky was gray, the air damp from a light drizzle, and the city streets buzzed with their usual rhythm. He stepped into a small cafe near the waterfront, planning only to sit with his coffee, sketch in his notebook, and let the noise of the world fade for a while. The cafe was indeed crowded. A few college students typed on laptops. An elderly couple shared a pastry. And the quiet hum of conversation blended with the soft jazz playing through the speakers. James ordered his drink, sat near the window, and pulled out his sketch pad. He had always carried it with him, half out of habit, half out of comfort. Designing homes was his work, but sketching scenes, faces, and little moments was his escape. He had just started sketching the outline, the harbor, when the door opened and someone walked in. He didn't notice at first. He was too focused on his pencil strokes. But then a sudden silence seemed to ripple in the room, and something pulled his eyes upward. She stood there, just inside the doorway. A woman with auburn hair, damp from the drizzle, holding a worn leather notebook close to her chest as if it were fragile. Her eyes scanned the cafe, slow and searching, and then they stopped right on him. James felt something stir in his chest. He didn't know her, had never seen her before, but her gaze lingered as though she recognized him. For a moment it was like the air between them held a secret he couldn't name. He shifted in his chair, caught off guard. He wasn't someone who believed in signs or chance meetings. Yet the way she looked at him, curious, cautious, almost tender, made his pulse quicken. She didn't look away immediately. Instead, she held his gaze, her expression softening into something that felt both familiar and unsettling. James lowered his eyes quickly, pretending to focus on his sketch. He told himself not to overthink it, that it was just a stranger glancing around a room. But his hand refused to keep moving. His pencil hovered over the page, useless. He could feel the weight of her presence even without looking up. She ordered a drink, her voice quiet but clear, and then walked through the cafe. James thought she would choose a seat by the window or in the corner. Instead, she passed right by his table, and as she did, she leaned slightly toward him. Just enough that only he could hear her whisper, "You remind me of someone I lost." James froze. The words struck him like a sudden gust of wind. His eyes lifted in surprise, but she was already walking away, settling into a seat across the room. She opened her notebook, pen in hand, as if nothing unusual had happened. He sat there, confused, his mind racing. What had she meant? Was it a mistake? Something she hadn't meant to say aloud? Or had she truly intended for him to hear it? And why him? Why had she chosen to say it to a stranger she had never met? He tried to return to his sketch, but the lines on the page no longer made sense. His thoughts spun around her words, around the look in her eyes, around the strange sense that the evening had shifted into something far from ordinary. From where he sat, he could see her writing quickly in her notebook, her brow furrowed, her lips pressed in concentration. She looked fragile and strong all at once, like someone carrying both a burden and a story. James found himself staring too long, then looking away, then staring again. Something about her unsettled him, not in a bad way, but in a way that demanded he pay attention. He sipped his coffee, pretending not to notice her, but every time she lifted her head, he felt the connection again, silent but undeniable. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he knew the moment had left an imprint on him. By the time he left the cafe that night, the drizzle had turned into steady rain. He tucked his sketchpad under his arm and walked toward the waterfront, but the sound of her whisper replayed in his mind. "You remind me of someone I lost." The words clung to him like the damp air, refusing to fade. He couldn't explain why they mattered so much. Maybe it was her voice, soft and trembling. Maybe it was the way her eyes had locked on his, as if she had found something she wasn't ready to admit. Or maybe it was because deep down, James had been carrying his own quiet loneliness, and her presence had cracked it open without warning that night, as he lay awake in his apartment. Listening to the rain against the windows, he thought about her again. He didn't even know her name, but he could see her face clearly, the auburn hair. The notebook pressed to her chest, the look in her eyes when they met his. He wondered who she had lost and why he reminded her of him. He wondered if he would ever see her again. James didn't realize it yet, but something had shifted in his life. What began as an ordinary Tuesday had become the start of a story he couldn't yet explain. One that would test the walls he had built around his heart. And though he didn't know it then, this was only the beginning. The next evening, James returned to the same cafe. He told himself it was just a place to relax after work, but deep down he knew the truth. He wanted to see her again. All day he had replayed the moment when she whispered those strange words to him. And no matter how many times he tried to brush it aside, it stayed in his mind when he stepped inside. The cafe looked almost the same as the night before. The same dim lights, the same faint music, the same hum of conversations. But his eyes searched the tables before he even ordered. And there she was by the window this time, with her notebook open. She was scribbling quickly, as if afraid her thoughts might slip away if she didn't capture them fast enough. James felt his heart pick up. He hesitated, debating whether to leave her alone. She might not even remember him, or worse, she might not want him near her. But something inside pushed him forward. He ordered his coffee, then walked toward her table. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. She looked up, startled for a moment. Then her expression softened into the faintest smile. "I was hoping you would." The words caught him off guard again. She spoke as though she had been waiting for him, as though his presence wasn't just welcome, but expected. He pulled out the chair and sat across from her, trying to keep his composure. Her name was Claire. She told him she was a writer, originally from Toronto, and she had come to Seattle for a short stay to finish a book project. James found himself leaning forward as she spoke. Her voice carried a mix of confidence and fragility, like someone used to creating worlds on paper but unsure how much to reveal about her own. "What do you write about?" He asked. "People," she answered simply. "Stories that live in ordinary days. Stories most of us overlook until they're gone." He thought about that for a moment, realizing how closely it matched the way she seemed to notice everything, the way her eyes lingered on details. Right. Most people ignored. She asked him about his work, and he explained he was an architect. She listened carefully, though even the smallest detail mattered. James didn't usually talk much about himself, but with her, it was different. He found himself sharing little pieces he rarely told anyone, how he sketched homes that felt more like sanctuaries, how he sometimes stayed awake at night imagining buildings that might never exist, and how the city often felt like a place filled with people but strangely lonely. Claire nodded slowly, as if she understood more than his words. Then she admitted she hadn't expected to connect with anyone while traveling. "But when I saw you yesterday," she said quietly, "I thought fate was playing a trick on me." The way she said it made his chest tighten. He wanted to ask what she meant, to press her about who she thought he reminded her of, but he couldn't bring himself to. Something about her expression told him she carried a story that wasn't ready to be told. Instead, he laughed nervously and tried to lighten the moment. "Fate doesn't usually stop by coffee shops, does it?" Her lips curved into a small smile, but her eyes didn't lose their depth. "Sometimes it does. Sometimes it hides in the places we least expect." The evening passed quickly. They talked about favorite books, childhood memories, and the small things that made them feel alive. With every word, James felt the space between them shrinking, not just physically, but emotionally. There was a pull. He couldn't explain something that felt both new and familiar, as though he had known her in another time. But beneath the warmth of their conversation, he noticed something else. Whenever she laughed, her smile never fully reached her eyes. Whenever she paused, it seemed as though a shadow crossed her thoughts. Claire carried a sorrow, one she was carefully hiding behind her notebook and her gentle words. At one point, James caught her staring at him in silence. He raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" She blinked as if pulled out of a dream. "Nothing," she said quickly. But then she lowered her gaze and added, "You just." Remind me that some things aren't as lost as I thought." The words left him unsettled, unsure if he was filling an empty space in her heart or standing in the shadow of someone else's memory. Still, he didn't want the evening to end as the cafe grew quieter and the last customers began to leave. Claire closed her notebook and tucked her pen away. She looked at him with an expression that was softer than any smile she had shown before. Her voice dropped low, almost to a whisper. "James," she said, "there's something you don't know about me." The way she spoke made his heart skip. It wasn't just the words, it was the weight behind them. The feeling that she was on the edge of revealing something that could change everything. He opened his mouth to ask, but she pressed her lips together as if deciding whether to continue. The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of a barista cleaning in the background. Her fingers traced the edge of her notebook nervously. James leaned forward, his voice steady. "Then tell me." But she only shook her head gently, her auburn hair falling across her face. "Not yet." The moment lingered between them, heavy and fragile. James wanted to press her, to break through the wall she had built, but he held back. Something told him that if he pushed too hard, she might retreat completely. So instead, he nodded, letting her keep her secret for now. He didn't realize it then, but that choice to wait instead of demand would be the reason their story continued. And as they left the cafe that night, walking in separate directions, James carried the echo of her words with him. "There's something you don't know about me." He couldn't sleep, wondering what it was. Over the next few days, their meetings became natural, almost as if they had always been part of each other's routine. James would leave his office, and without thinking too hard, he would head to the cafe. Sometimes Claire was already there by the window with her notebook. Other times she would arrive a few minutes later, spotting him with a smile that looked like relief. They never planned it, yet they always seemed to find each other. Their conversations stretched longer each evening. They spoke about books, travel, the small details of life, and even silence felt comfortable between them. James noticed she carried herself like someone who had been through something heavy but didn't want pity. Instead, she spoke with warmth, and when she laughed, it made him feel lighter. Still, there was something she hadn't shared, and he could sense it like a shadow trailing close behind her. One rainy night, they decided to take a walk instead of sitting in the cafe. The drizzle had grown into a steady rain, so they shared his umbrella as they walked along the waterfront. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, and the sound of the waves mixed with the rain. James felt strangely at peace, though his heart kept beating faster the closer she stood beside him. They walked for a while without speaking, the silence holding them together rather than apart. Then Claire slowed her steps. She looked at the water, her grip on the umbrella tightening. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost lost in the rain. "I need to tell you something, James." He turned to her, noticing the way her face had changed, softer, more vulnerable. She wasn't smiling now. Her eyes held a weight he hadn't seen before. "I was engaged once," she said. "His name was Daniel." She paused, as though even saying his name carried pain. "He passed away 2 years ago." James stopped walking. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Suddenly, her guarded silences, her distant expressions. The way she had said he reminded her of someone, it all made sense. She kept speaking, her voice trembling. "He was everything I thought my life would be. And when he was gone, it felt like the world went quiet. I stopped writing for months. I stopped living, really. Coming here to Seattle was supposed to be about finishing a book. But maybe it was just me trying to find a place where the memories didn't follow me everywhere." James listened, his heart aching for her. He wanted to comfort her, to say something that would take away the pain, but nothing seemed enough. He realized now why she had hesitated, why she carried both warmth and sorrow at once. She wasn't just a stranger with a notebook. She was someone who had loved deeply and lost more than he could. "Imagine," Claire turned to him, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "When I saw you that first night, I thought for a second that Daniel had somehow come back. It was crazy, I know. But you reminded me of him, the way you sat there, the way you looked at me. And it scared me, because I didn't know if it meant I wasn't ready to move on, or if I was. James felt his chest tighten. He didn't want to be a replacement for someone else. Yet the way she was looking at him wasn't just about memory. It was about now. He saw the conflict in Hertha, pulled between holding on to the past and reaching toward something new. Without thinking, he said softly, "You don't have to explain, Claire. I understand." She shook her head. "No, James. You don't. You don't know how it feels to want to love again but be terrified of betraying someone who's gone. Part of me still belongs to him, but part of me feels alive when I'm with you. And that scares me more than anything." For a long moment, they stood there under the umbrella, rain tapping above them, silence stretching between their words. James wanted to tell her he felt the same, that he had been drawn to her from the first moment. But he also knew her heart was fragile. Pushing too hard could break what was slowly growing between them. He reached for her hand gently, giving her the chance to pull away. To his surprise, she didn't. Her fingers intertwined with his, trembling but steady enough to hold. "Claire," he said, his voice low, "I don't want to replace your past. I just want to be here now with you." Her lips parted as if she wanted to reply, but just then her phone rang. The sound cut through the moment sharply. She glanced at the screen, her face clouding over. She pulled her hand from his and stepped back. "I have to go," she whispered. Her tone carried urgency, almost fear. "Claire," James began. She shook her head quickly. "Please," she said, her voice pleading, "don't follow me tonight." Before he could say more, she turned and hurried away, her figure disappearing into the rain-soaked streets. James stood there, holding the umbrella alone, his heart pounding. He felt helpless. In one moment she had opened her heart, and in the next she had pulled away again. He wanted to run after her, to demand answers, but he remembered the look in her eyes, fragile, conflicted, and afraid. Pushing her now might only drive her further, so he stayed there, watching the rain fall, the sound of her words echoing in his mind. "Part of me feels alive when I'm with you, and that scares me more than anything." That night, back in his apartment, James couldn't sleep. He replayed every second of their walk, every word she had spoken, every flicker of expression on her face. He thought about Daniel, the man she had lost, and how impossible it must feel for her to open her heart again. Yet she had held his hand. She had let him see the truth she kept hidden from everyone else. James realized then that he was no longer just curious about her. He was already falling. And even though it scared him too, he knew he couldn't walk away now. This was no longer just a chance encounter in a cafe. It was something that had the power to change both of their lives. James spent the next 2 days restless. He went to work, sat through meetings, and even tried to sketch at night. But his mind kept circling back to Claire. He could still feel the warmth of her hand in his, still hear her voice trembling as she confessed her fear of loving again. But what haunted him most was the way she pulled away. Her last words echoing in his mind, "Please, don't follow me tonight." He hadn't. He had respected her request. But now he was left with nothing but questions. Why had she left so suddenly? Who had called her? Was she already gone from Seattle? The thought of never seeing her again filled him with a hollow ache he couldn't explain. On the third evening, he couldn't resist. He went back to the cafe. She wasn't there. He sat by the window for an hour, waiting, pretending to read, though his eyes never left the door. But she didn't come by the fourth day. He told himself he needed to let it go. Yet his heart argued against it. Something had started between them, something fragile but real. He couldn't just let her vanish without knowing where it might have led. That evening, as the rain finally cleared, James walked to the train station. It wasn't planned. His feet carried him there as though he was following an instinct. And when he entered the station, his heart stopped. There she was. Claire stood near the platform, a suitcase at her side, her notebook tucked under her arm. She looked both determined and heartbroken, staring at the departure board as if unsure whether to stay or leave. James walked toward her before he could think. "You're leaving?" His voice cracked more than he intended. Claire turned, startled. When she saw him, her eyes filled with emotion. "James?" She shook her head slowly. "I didn't want you to find me here." "Why?" he asked. His steps carried him closer until he stood just a few feet away. "After everything we've shared, you are just going to disappear." Her lips trembled. "I came here to finish writing a story, and I did. But then you happened. And now I don't know what's real anymore. I thought I was ready, but I'm not. I'm afraid of what?" Her voice broke as she whispered, "Afraid of losing again. Afraid of opening my heart only to watch it shatter." James' chest tightened. He understood now she wasn't running from him. She was running from the pain of the past. But he also knew if he let her leave, he would regret it for the rest of his life. He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Claire, I don't want to replace Daniel. I don't want to take what you had away. I just want a chance to be part of what comes next. I don't care if it's messy or slow. I just don't want this to end before it even begins." Her eyes shone with tears. "But what if I can't give you everything? What if part of me always belongs to him?" "Then let it," James said firmly. "You don't have to give me all at once. Just give me today and tomorrow, and we'll see where it goes. Isn't that what love is? Choosing each day, even when it's scary." For a moment, she didn't move. The sound of the station filled the space, the murmur of voices, the distant whistle of a train, the rolling wheels of luggage across the floor. Claire's hand gripped the handle of her suitcase as though it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Then the announcement came. Her train would arrive in 5 minutes. She closed her eyes as if battling herself. When she opened them again, James saw both fear and hope fighting inside her. He reached out his hand. "Stay," he whispered. "Not for forever, just for now. Give us the chance to see what this could be." Claire's fingers trembled, but she didn't take his hand. Instead, she asked softly, "And if I break your heart?" James managed a small, aching smile. "Then at least it was broken for the right reason, because I cared enough to risk it." The whistle blew again, sharper this time. The train pulled in, its lights cutting through the station. Claire looked at it, then back at him. Her tears finally spilled, and she shook her head in disbelief. "You caught me off guard from the very beginning. I didn't know how to explain it then. I don't know how to explain it now." James' hand was still waiting, steady, patient. "Then don't explain. Just feel. Just choose." Her suitcase slipped from her grasp, falling against the floor with a soft thud. The sound was drowned out by the train's brakes screeching, but James noticed. She stepped toward him, closing the space between them. And for the first time since they met, her eyes no longer carried just sadness. They carried hope. Claire lifted her hands, placed them gently against his chest, and whispered, "Maybe love doesn't need explanations. Maybe it just needs courage." And before he could speak, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. It wasn't a grand gesture, not a dramatic kiss, but something far more real. It was the choice to stay. The train doors opened, people rushed inside, announcements echoed overhead, but none of it mattered. Claire had chosen not to board. She had chosen him, at least for this moment. James wrapped his arms around her carefully, as though afraid she might vanish, and she held on just as tightly. In that embrace, the weight of the past didn't disappear, but it softened. For the first time in years, Claire allowed herself to believe in tomorrow. And James knew that sometimes. The most unexpected encounters, the ones that begin with a glance in a cafe, a whispered word, or a fragile confession, are the ones that change everything.